I'm so excited to have you guys here today.
Yeah, bro.
We're here live on campus at Vintage Church with the worship leadership team. We have Dimitri and Nick here with us today. Yeah, let's welcome them. How you guys feeling, man?
Feeling really good.
Good, man.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's a little cold in here, man.
I'm bundled up.
We brought you here to warm it up.
Right, yeah. Who would have thought LA would be cold, man?
Yeah. 5 days a year, it'll be cold.
Right,
and
the
then
5
the
days.
rest is fair.
I
It's all
know.
good. Yeah.
Feels like we're living in Haiti.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. What do you guys do on the team here?
Nice. Well, yeah, I'm the music director here,
Yeah.
and I've been here for a year and a half or so.
Yeah.
Actually, almost 2 years, and in April it'll be 2 years. So
Wow.
it's kind of crazy. But yeah, music director here, kind of just like oversee our team, our band, and do a lot of stuff on Sunday, like leading the team, leading the band, and leading out moments, and just kind of helping cultivate our volunteer team. That was like the main reason I came through, was to start cultivating volunteers, growing them, help kind of raising them up from whatever giftings they already had. And so, and it's been a cool thing. And I feel like more recently I've realized that my job is to help just make sure people are like having fun doing this, because sometimes in worship ministry and church and things like that, it can feel very serious, and I'm a very serious person. Like I take it all very seriously. But if our team, like our volunteer team, can't be having fun, and it's like too serious, almost too difficult for where they're at, then that's really then I'm not doing what I think I need to be doing. So I'm like counselor of musical fun, maybe is how I would describe it. But yeah.
Do you feel like that helps keep people around too longer? Like, 'cause sometimes when you have the dynamics of running a worship community, there's sort of a transient, especially in LA. I noticed there's a transient culture of like in and out. Some seasons you'll have like killer. Some seasons like they're just gone.
Yeah. Well, I think of this like this Craig Rochelle quote where he says, "You can have control or you can have growth. You can't have both of them." And I feel like with the volunteer model of team. You got to like lean towards having them grow, and a lot of times it's outside of like the things that I can control and I can do with my own power. And I think again that goes back to like if they feel like they're growing and that they're getting better, that's more fun. It feels like more enjoyable. It feels like people actually getting something out of it outside of like doing serving at church is fulfilling for most people. But also some people are like, I also want to grow and I want to like get better at what I do as well. And so I feel like if we're balancing that, we're doing a good thing. Because I've been places where it's all about like, hey, there's like a really clear and distinct vision, a thing we want to do, and that takes a lot of skill and effort, which is like they're not bad things, but with a volunteer team, people just like serving out of the goodness of their hearts, it's hard to like get there very quickly. So we have like a vision of like what we want, but we don't want to control the pace of how we get there. I'd rather focus on how we grow our team so we can we will get there. It's just a matter of like having people around still, because there is like a little bit of a math to it with our team, and making sure that we have like a quality team each week, and we're like serving our church well. So there's a balance there, but overall it's like if people aren't having fun, they won't stick around. They won't want to do it as much, and and that can especially once you get there, it can be tough to like bring people back, right? So
that's really cool. Nick, what about yourself, man? What do you do on the team here?
I am the worship apprentice. My main job at the moment is to sponge as much knowledge as possible from Sammy, who's not here, who's our default worship leader and I guess interim director. And then sponging as much knowledge from this guy as well. And one thing that Dimitri did like nail on the head right now is just maintaining a current atmosphere of enjoyment and joy. Because waking up early, 6 a.m., 5 a.m. sometimes, driving a long way to come church to like worship, and you're stressed about not knowing your part too well and everything. If you come in and like a director is just going hard on you about not being prepared, it's like that's not creating a good culture. It quickly becomes toxic, and it takes a lot of patience and humility and level-headedness to create an atmosphere of joy. It's sometimes harder than it appears to be, but Dimitri does that really well, and that's something I've been like observing and like learning a lot from and trying to implement whenever I'm directing a band and everything. But yeah, so for me, I am just the worship apprentice. I try to help out wherever I can and learn as much as I can. Yeah. And I came into the worship team with limited experience in worship. Yeah. So for me, I've been here for about 1.5 years now, a little more than that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Feels like almost 2 years now. I came a little bit after Dimitri. And I feel like I've had to cram maybe, 5 years of worship experience into 1.5, and it can be pretty daunting and intimidating sometimes. But just trying to do the best that I can and trying to come out of it being equipped to be able to direct worship bands and also take the culture that we've cultivated here into other avenues in LA, other churches possibly, who knows. But
that's cool, man. Do you guys both grow up in church?
You know what? I did and I didn't. I mean, I grew up Greek Orthodox. So from when I was really young, like 5 years old till I was 13, I was doing that every Sunday. And, it was a lot like Catholic church, like a mass and things like that. We had Sunday school. And so that was like a part of my growth. But I was like fortunate enough to go to like a private Christian school from kindergarten through 12th grade. I went to the same school the entire time. And we would have like chapel and we would have like worship leaders doing, contemporary worship music or whatever. And so that was like a seed that was like being planted in me like simultaneously. So I'm like going to church, and then I'm also at this Christian school. Yeah. And then what got me into churches that are more kind of like vintage was from a girl, always happens, right? It's always a lady. She invited me to youth group, and I had no idea what youth group was, and her like mom's boyfriend came and picked us up, and like he had a van. This is when vans were safe, and it was fine to like jump in a van. Right. And then we went to the youth group at this church on the hill. Literally, it's like on a hill. That's cool. And then that was when I was already doing music at that time, and then that's when I started getting involved. Like it was kind of, really small youth group, so it was like, okay, you play guitar, and it's like now you play guitar and you sing, and you're gonna. And we just had like, sheet music of worship tunes lying around, and we just put like every time we'd have youth group, we just pull them and start doing songs and whatever. And so it was me and my buddy mostly doing that, and then I started serving in the main service and whatnot. And so that was kind of like my growing up church experience. It wasn't until like maybe high school that like my faith became a lot more personal to me, and I felt like I had to go do this on my own because my parents weren't too involved in that way. So me and my brother, like by the grace of God, just were really involved in church, but we were going to like separate churches because our parents weren't really involved in that piece. So we just kind of found our own way. And through different friend groups and stuff. So it was just cool because I feel like it's kind of the rarity. Like usually, like people are coming into church situations because they're like their parents drag them over, or that's like their community and whatever. Yeah. And so we were like kind of, a little bit, vagabond. It was just sort of like I knew some people that went to one church. My brother knew some people that went to another church, and so then that was just kind of the thing. We're both serving there. So that's like my experience growing up in church. But
what about you, Nick?
Well, I had no clue you went to a private school.
Yeah, I know. Does it show? I don't know. Isn't that like lame or something?
No, I grew up going to a Christian private school as well, kindergarten through 12th grade. And I grew up in a very Christian community, actually. I think the town that I grew up in has it's rated as one of the top towns that has the most churches in it.
Where's that?
Just south of Portland, a little town called Newburgh.
Okay, I was gonna say you have a Portland vibe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean everyone I encounter, they're like, you're Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, you got that vibe, bro.
Yeah, you can't escape it. But yeah, no, I grew up in a Christian family. My father is a pastor. So very much from an early age, I grew up with the gospel, and looking back on that, I feel incredibly grateful for that upbringing, especially coming to LA and realizing that that's a rarity for people to have that kind of upbringing in this day and age, especially in LA. And for me, I grew up playing guitar in church. Church was like the place to learn how to play, and you could get comfortable playing in front of people. So just from a very early age, it was like a gift to be able to grow as a musician because of the church. And I played guitar in youth group and like sang a little bit in the choir, or in the school I went to was, it was very intense with choir. Everybody had to do choir. And so I fell in love with old hymns and harmonies. And so I just became very fascinated with like composition. And so for me, I fell in love with like incorporating like old church choir choral music with my own compositions and stuff. And so I had this brain of like, whenever I'm writing vocal parts, I'm always thinking of like multiple harmonies to go along with it and stuff. And
genius.
There's just a beauty in it, you know. I don't know if it was, I don't think it was genius.
You a genius, Nick. Come on, man. You trying to be humble. It's all good, man.
But quickly fell in love with choral music, and I still have a deep heart for that style. And then at some point, just growing up, my brother and I, we both got, as typical teenagers do, we got jaded, we got disenchanted with going to church. We both played in like rock and roll bands growing up, and fell in love with that culture as well, because it was like high energy, adrenaline.
Of course,
there was, a lot of tension from girls and everything. And so it became a drug, basically, and we fell in love with that. And we both moved to Canada, and we pursued that pretty heavily. We played in bars and venues in people's houses, and we very quickly strayed away from the church. And at some point, I got so disenchanted with church that I said I was never going to play in another worship band ever again. And that was probably when I was like 18, 19. And I think it's just because I became somewhat prideful in my own self, and just thought worship music was phony, it was fake, it was creating a superficial experience. And I think mostly because I stopped having spiritual encounters listening to worship music. And so I was maybe just projecting my own feelings onto other people's experiences. But it wasn't until I started living in LA in my early 20s, and just experienced a lot of brokenness. This was like pre-COVID. And for whatever reason, I was walking down a sidewalk, and I just saw a sign for Vintage Church, and I was at my breaking point, just in life. And I decided to walk in, and immediately was struck by the worship music. And
struck by Dimitris.
This was before Dimitri. This was
this is for you.
Yeah,
this was when I
was like, did he whip out the hair?
You might have been there, honestly.
You would have been there. This was at the West LA campus. And
West LA.
Yeah, I just went in on a whim one day, and was immediately moved by the worship. And I don't know why, because I was so jaded towards it. But then somebody offered to pray for me, and had a word for me that really affected me, and I started going every week, and I immediately got overtaken by the Spirit. And I felt it on my own conscience to like serve the church in some capacity. And I was like, well, I play guitar, maybe I'll audition for the worship team. Didn't think I was going to get in it or anything, but I felt like God was really like putting it on my heart to do it. So I decided to, listen to that and just say, you know what, I'm just going to audition. Whatever happens, happens. And then, they were like, dude, you're amazing. Like, we got to get you to play. Yeah. And then I got on the team, and then COVID happened, and I didn't get to play for a whole year.
Right. Yeah.
I remember feeling the pressure of wanting to leave LA because everything was closing down. Yeah. And when you're a working musician, there's not much to do.
Right.
But for whatever reason, I felt like God brought me to that church, and he brought me to that team, and I felt like he was telling me to wait and to remain faithful to serving on that team. And I waited for a whole year to play, and I started playing. And then 3 months later was offered this apprenticeship, and it's transformed my life entirely. And now I'm a huge advocate for worship music. There's power in it.
Yeah.
There's spiritual encounter. Heaven does come down. And yeah, it brings transformation. And for me, the main metaphor in my life, or story that I love the most, is the walls of Jericho, where they're literally just marching around worshiping, and then the walls come down.
So good.
And for me, that's been the power of worship. Has brought down walls in my life. It's brought down walls in relationships that I've had with other people. And every day I just see more and more power in worship. So I was so naive in my early teens towards being jaded towards worship music. So, and I'm learning that more and more every day. Just getting to do it every week.
Yeah, it's a beautiful journey, man.
Yeah, it's been wild.
You guys both feel like worship is a sacred call.
Oh yeah.
I know we live in modern times, but do you get that sense, like in the Levitical era, where it was like a sacred high call? Do you ever feel like that sometimes?
I think it's a sacred call. I don't know if it's as sacred as it used to be, because I think about that a lot, like what you're talking about, like the kind of like the Levite, like what is that today? And I know some places like they kind of roll with that, but especially like Nick sings and leads worship like fairly often, and so he's got a different thing. But for me specifically, like I mostly just play guitar. I can sing if it's necessary, but my main thing is like playing the guitar or keys or whatever, just playing an instrument. So I think about the Levites a lot, because a lot of like the scriptures, like they just started playing their instruments, and then that's when Spirit would come and the healing would happen and all these things. And so I think about that stuff a lot, because I don't know if that's as true today in terms of the effect and the understanding people have around it. I think, again, some cultures it is, but I think worship has definitely become more accessible in a way, whereas I feel like, I think about like the Levites, like those people were like committed, and they were like almost a protected kind of class of people. Whereas today it's kind of like we're definitely like trying to bring as many people into it, which I think is like a good and right thing. But I definitely see a part of it where it's like I think of the Levites, and I think of like how much they pursued excellence. And to me, that transfers to like if I go see like an orchestra, or I see some jazz music or something like that, and I have like Holy Spirit encounters in those moments, because it's like these people are so committed, and there's no words, but like especially you think of, I think it was Beethoven who like most of his big symphonies, it was like written as like worship to God, and like a lot of the titles are associated with that, and so I just think of like, man, like that's like kind of the bar in a way, that's music that really moves people and has moved people for centuries. And so I know I'm almost getting like far from your question in a way, but I think music and worship is still a sacred thing in our culture, but it's almost blending in a little bit with music just in the general day to day. I think the sacredness, I think, comes mostly from experiences we have like in person. And I don't know if I think you can have experiences like solo and on your own, and I don't think that stuff is out of the realm of possibility, but I definitely think it comes through like those in-person experiences with others that music really becomes like a sacred thing. But I don't know if we treat musicians and especially worship musicians the same way as Levites, and I also don't know if a lot of maybe popular worship musicians maybe act like Levites too. Maybe that's another like side of it, right? Yeah. So I think there's pieces of it that are still in there, but I don't know if there's like a lot of people who think like, oh, they're just gonna hear like just instrumental music and then be healed. Like there's like we've kind of created a lot of different experiences that I think it sometimes people can feel like they lean one way or another on it. But I feel like it's still there. It's just, I think it's a lot more than we make it out to be. I think it's a lot more. I think it takes a lot more commitment and time, and not just time like skills with your instrument, but time with the Lord, and those are the things that can get tough in our culture today, because it's like a lot of like, well, I'm going to be very committed to my music and the Lord these times of the week, rather than like, I think of a Levites, like that was like day and night, 24/7. Like that is all they're focused on, you know. So, you know, like I look at it as like that's the bar I'm trying to go for a little bit, but it's a struggle. It's hard, you know.
Yeah. The reason why I say it, because I feel like the role of worship leaders in the team is to lead people to the throne of grace every Sunday, or you know, if there's a service during the week, you know, whenever there's worship. We'll say that. Whenever there's worship, that is kind of our job, is to lead the congregation, like a whole entire room, to the throne of grace. And so that takes a certain level of laying down and, you know, submitting to the Holy Spirit, also getting yourself out of the way, because you can't be in the way. You can't successfully lead them there if you're in the way. So that's why I was more presenting that, because then there's the after effects where you hear later the testimonies of I got healed.
Right.
And so I remember being on the road and experiencing, you know, seeing people with those giant kind of tumors on their neck, and then like later on that disappearing through a chorus. You might have kept looping for 15 minutes, and the leader didn't know why, but God said do it, and they did it. And so that's why I present that as like, do you think that there is still maybe even an element of sacredness to it because of how God still moves through it, how people get saved, like Nick got impacted and is not here today because of it. So when you hear something like that, it has to be, there has to be some sort of.
No, I think it's there. I think it's all dependent on like how much time and space do we allow for it? You know, I think that's a lot more where it is.
Like in your daily life, you're saying?
Yeah, in your daily life, and even just like it, you know, during like corporate, you know, worship experiences or services or whatever, you know, whatever, however you want to word it. I think it just depends on the space we leave, and I think like how it ties into vintage a bit is like we are in an area, like a part of town in LA where like people's time and attention is like so valuable to
time
them,
is money.
and and people so we have to really like focus in on like the short moments we get to like create that, and that's what becomes really hard, and why I almost like struggle with your question in a way, because I'm like I think it is still there. I think it's just like like maybe sometimes we don't allow enough time to see it, or we are just like leaving that little bit of room open, and things happen, and we might not see it, and we might not know it. It might not be the like, you know, the big encounters where people are falling over like week in and week out. But I do often think, and I pray this a lot, where I say like, if there's just that one person that like comes in, that's you know, that's walking by the church, that maybe just gets nudged a little bit closer to the Lord because of like something that we're doing here in church, like that's what's worth it. And whether or not I know that, that's just my prayer, that's my hope. And I feel like that keeps me grounded, and I sort of joke about it sometimes, but I'm always like leaving my expectations kind of low, and maybe that's a low. Maybe some people are like, no, it's got to be 25 people or 50 or whatever. Like I'm just like, no, if one person was moved just a little bit closer to the Lord from something we were able to be a part of, like to me that is like fully, that is the reason we're there. That's the, you know, it's the reason for everything we do, even though it might feel like we're doing a lot. Like it's like, oh, man, we're doing, you know, 6 songs for just one person to maybe know the Lord better. And I'm like, yeah, like that's, to me, that's well worth it.
On Sunday mornings, we used to have these worship services that would be, in our opinion, really bad. And we were like, that was the worst set of my life. Gosh,
no response from the people.
It just felt
lack of response.
It just felt terrible, like you're just running up against a brick wall the whole entire time, and you feel drained, you feel upset, disappointed. and you walk on stage, and then there's like people in the back the stage of the hallway, and they're like, that was amazing. Oh my gosh, it changed my life. I went up and got prayer and got healed or got saved. And you're like, oh. And it was always so convicting because you felt like God was just like, I moved through it. It's not about you, how you felt. Right. I was still doing stuff in the room. It was like that when I went on a short leg tour with this guy named Sean Foyt. And we went to, we drove through the night from Vegas to Utah. And, man, we got maybe about 2-3 hours of sleep. Hour and 20 minutes of sleep. So we had to be up at the church the next day. And, you know, we're pretty tired, but we're like kazaking ourselves in the Lord for energy. And we get up there, start playing. And, dude, the whole congregation was just standing still. I called it Church of the Living Stones.
That's the kind of culture that I grew up in.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that's probably, owed to the fact that it made me jaded. I'm like, there isn't power in this. People just standing there like, when can this be over?
Yeah. And it's hard because if you are a person who kind of feeds off the room, like even when you go to a concert, sort of like the musicians will feed off the crowd. Like when I went and saw Mute Math, I noticed the drummer picks somebody in the crowd, Darren King, and he'll feed off their energy, the person who's jumping or going. And so it was hard because I kind of am like that too a little bit. I feed a little bit off the room and what God is doing. But when people are standing there going, it's super discouraging. And then there's a point where you just sort of give up. And I just like, let's just get to this set. And even like the worship leaders like, push it, come on, And dude, nobody was really moving. But it wasn't until toward the end there was a single moment that shifted everything, and I just went berserk. There was a guy standing there, and he just was like, he had one hand. He had one hand. I call it the cauldron of anointing, where you allow the anointing of the Lord to slide into your spirit. You just hold your hand like that, But he had one single tear that came down his eye, and there it is. And I just, there's God. And then afterwards we heard a flood of testimonies, but those are one of those things where you're like, I didn't feel good in the room,
and it's I think there's like it can just happen in like the sliver of things, and especially like when you do this kind of thing, you ask yourself a lot of questions. Like, man, why do I spend, like, if I'm just focusing on like what I do, like playing guitar, it's like, why am I focusing like so much on, that little that one little tweakable thing on my reverb or this like pedal or whatever. And it's like if I can really like strive towards excellence in these very, very small things, like that might just be enough to like push someone over the edge. And I see it all the time with like people who come to church that have like experience in music, like maybe they just play guitar at home or like whatever, and they'll come up after service and they'll be like, hey, that's a cool guitar, like, oh, there's a, it's like, and like, are you here every week? And I'm like, yeah, I've been here every week. And I'm just like we didn't talk about God like in that moment necessarily, but like something in that person like changed to want to like have that conversation or be interested. And in one way or another, it's because I was like slaving away at this like one little thing, playing this one little part. And it's not necessarily to be showy or whatever. It's just like, no, I just want to be, again, it's like totally simple, just being faithful in the littlest things. So that, when the bigger thing comes or the more responsibility comes, like you're ready for that. And if you can't be faithful, and I've had a real trouble with this, like being faithful in those small things, because sometimes I'm like, well, this doesn't meet the bar of what I think is, worthy of my time or my energy or whatever. And it's hard to find those moments too, but
Yeah, I was going to jump on that. It was funny. You made me think of just people's comments that they'll give me after a worship set. Like 99% of the time, somebody is commenting. Somebody will come up and talk to me not about my guitar tone or my guitar playing, but they'll talk about my expression and my movements. And they'll say,
interesting.
They'll say, wow, it's just really inspiring to see how you worship. It's really cool. And I've had some people say, like, I've seen your journey I had one person come up to me and they said, like, I've been watching you for a year now, and seeing your journey from how you worship has just been so encouraging and inspiring. For me, it's like, wow. Well, that's incredible. So there's power in just raising your hands and having somebody watch you for a year. It makes them more comfortable to want to be expressive in their worship. But also at the same time too, there is a labor of love with guitar tone, where you do pour your soul into it, but it gets to the point where it's like it's almost good that people aren't talking about it, because they're just it's just at this point now where it's good, where it's not really distracting people,
It's kind of an unspoken truth of like, I don't know, I think people feel touched, and it's they feel touched and moved by like you putting all your effort into having the right tone. I love when I hear a perfect tone. When it doesn't distract, but it adds.
Exactly.
If it doesn't subtract from worship, but it adds to it. It's a beautiful thing, man.
People can recognize commitment. People can easily recognize commitment and dedication to something and excellence. Like it's all super recognizable, And it's those simple things, like you see something and there's like the two responses of like, oh, well, that was nice. They seem to like, try their best or whatever. And some people are like, man, they just got it like locked in. Like, I don't even understand fully what they're doing, but like this is.
But it allows them to not be distracted by it as well. When somebody plays so well, takes it super seriously, and makes sure that their tone is pleasant to the ear. It's not like ear piercing. And they just know their part, and it's locked in. They're not distracting people from being able to encounter the Lord. Like they're elevating it almost. It's a platform to carry them,
Yeah, I know. Even as a musician, like when everything is just like, oh man, everybody's like, their parts are down, and we're all just in sync with the Spirit. It's just, it feels like there's just like no limit to where you can go in the Spirit. You're like, like,
so I think
to
play into that question of like, is worship sacred? I mean, with something sacred, it means you treat it well. Like you take it very seriously. You make sure it does not get, it doesn't get muck on it or mud or rust or anything. You're constantly grooming it, taking care of it so that it doesn't decay.
And then I've even heard you say like you'll do sabbaticals and stuff on the weekend before.
I mean, it goes into the, like I was talking to someone yesterday, and it was Brandon, who plays drums on our team, and he was talking about how he didn't get a lot of sleep the night before, and I was saying like, dude, I feel the same kind of anxiety sometimes on Saturdays going into Sunday mornings for like a number of reasons. And I was like, dude, sadly, like my only way to like combat that is like I get in bed at 9, or like 8:30 or whatever. And it's like, it's not fun. It's not cool. Like there's no like, cool sacred ritual. It's just like, I know I need to like really prioritize this. Yeah. And it does kind of like, it's almost like a lifestyle choice in a way. Not that I would be doing anything crazy on Saturdays like otherwise, but it's like I definitely know like if I do something on Saturday, I am like contributing to what my Sunday might be, and to me it's like it's such a high importance thing. And it can be in the simplest stuff, like this last week was a perfect example of where I just had a lot of things pop up in the week, and for me it's like I think it's like a small little threshold. It was like one thing on Sunday night, one thing on Wednesday night, something on Friday night. And that's enough to like push me over where I'm like, on Saturday, I need to be in like the hyperbaric chamber, like just like, recharging, like getting ready. Cause I just, just care so much about this because, if I put that much commitment into this, it might just nudge somebody that little bit more. And that's, that's what I care about. But
that's awesome, man. Really quick, before we go, what does worship look like to you guys, and how you walk that out in your everyday life?
Yeah, every day, man. It's just the little, like those little moments with the Lord. Whether it's like full on classified as worshipful. I think if I can put in like just a small amount of time with God each day, preferably like in the morning and at night, that kind of like bookmark or like bookend kind of thing. That's the thing that keeps me like primed and ready for when he like needs to use me. You know what I mean? And it's those things that are like the hardest to like keep hold of, because I can put so much focus on the other things, the other types of preparation and stuff. But if I'm not giving those little bits of time, especially like at the start of my day, end of my day, if I'm not giving those times to him, then it's like all my other time is like compromised. You know, I can't just like pull it out of, you know, but I also don't like, you know, fake it either. If my time with the Lord has not been consistent, hasn't been ready, it's like I'm not gonna like fake it just because I think it could, you know, help, you know, the energy of some situation. But for me, it's just that those little things every day that help kind of prune and create a lifestyle worship that's not so much, again, like it's lifestyle worship to me doesn't mean like, well, it's because I have Sundays and I have this worship thing here and this worship thing
every
there.
day, man.
It's just everyday little things. If it's like reading something out of a book or reading the Bible or just having time in silence, those are the things that I think really, those things are worshipful, and they really contribute to the times of worship that we kind of put on the calendar, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Worship. What was the question again? What
does worship mean to you, and how do you walk that out in your life, your everyday life?
Well, worship for me, when I'm experiencing it, it needs to be, it needs to be believable. Like the best music that I hear is when I believe what the person is singing. Otherwise, it's not compelling.
Yeah.
And that's what brought me in when I first experienced worship, was I saw people for the first time in my life worshiping, and I could see on their faces that they believed what they were singing. Yeah. And that drew me in. And then when you hear, you know, like a major add 9 chord or something along with it, it like bolsters that even more for me, you know. But worship in daily life is just an external expression of what I believe. And if somebody can see me, I would want somebody to see me worshiping and say like, oh, wow, he really believes. Because even sometimes in my own life, it's hard to represent belief, because we get angry, we lose control, we get lazy, you know, we struggle with, you know, horrible thoughts and whatnot. But then worship can be one thing that is pretty accessible, at least in my own life, that can express my beliefs. When I'm struggling with anger or something, I can worship and I can say, you know, I don't have to be angry. I can send all my praises to a God that has control and sovereignty over the universe, and has grace that he pours out every day. But for me, it's just an external expression of belief. And the cool thing is that music has always been that universal language for people to connect. And so it's just, worship's a beautiful tool to be able to not only enhance our own lives, but also to reach non-believers as well. So, yeah.
That's really good, man. What do you guys feel like the direction of worship in the church today is heading? When you put you know, the senses out there, what are you sensing the direction things are heading?
It's so tough to nail down, but the first thought that comes to my mind is, it's almost a little bit of like what Nick was just saying, where I don't want to say there's like an extremism to it right now, but it feels like if it's not like full one way or the other, it's really hard for it to catch fire in a way. And
how so?
I think of these moves of God, like specifically like things like Upper Room in Dallas. Like I watched this thing online, and it was their like Gen Z for Jesus conference that they did. Big old conference, like a bunch of again like just kids, and their worship teams are going like nuts. Like these people are just in like for me, I almost felt like spiritually immature. I'm just watching this video, you know. And I think there was like something they said there where it was like this sort of like what looks like, you know, uncontrolled passion or response or whatever. It's like that. It'll look like uncontrolled and almost like crazy to someone like me who might be like a little lukewarm, just like watching this video, you know, from afar. And so I feel like that to me is really sticking out these days when I'm like seeing what other people are doing. And I think there's something for that to play into it. I just wonder also, like, how do you take, you know, the bits of that and balance it for different places and different situations? Because I think that passion is necessary, and I love it. I'm so encouraged by those things. Like again, like these people are they're getting like raucous over like worship and praise, and there's like skateboards on stage, and like these guys, like it's just like it's just really like crazy. It's this crazy scene that I'm just like seeing sprout up, and part of me is like, you know what, this is like a little crazy, and this is not how I grew up, and it's not my temperament all the way. But if people are like starting here, you know, it's like this is a cool thing that I think we'll see start to play out a bit more naturally. I think there's something about places like that, whether it's their upper room or it's places like Bethel where people see that and then they try to copy it, which I think there's something fine about that, and it's okay to have those things as like a sort of marker. But if it's not really like, if you're not really in that situation, you're just sort of I don't know, not really honoring like where you're at, because you're just like, well, I just want it to be like this rather than where I'm at right now. And so I think there's cool things about that we can bring into there, but it's just about trying to take those things, those fires we see, and try to just take a little bit of it and sprinkle it into like wherever we're at, because I think it can be the temptation, and something I see a lot where people are like, oh, I need to press the button on like going to that place of where these other churches or other worship teams go, and I feel like that's maybe created a little bit of a not so authentic worship expression in maybe the majority of churches, just because people are trying to force something that sometimes is not. It's like that might not just not be in their worship rhythms right now. And I think about that a lot with our culture at Vintage, because there's people that just have like, they're coming back from church hurt in the past, or they're coming from Catholic church.
Well, there's a lot of new believers from when I was. Garrett told me. I mean, I think it was 90-something% people who didn't really even know God.
Didn't again, like even me, like I didn't grow up in any sort of charismatic traditions or anything like that, and so even for me, like I feel like I'm lucky enough to have a good pulse on like when we do like inch into that, we go into that a bit more. I'm like, okay, I have a sensibility of this where it's like, this isn't crazy. Like God is like moving, God is doing something here, and we're not forcing this. Like He's taking just what we're doing and going for it. Whereas sometimes, especially in worship culture, when it comes to things that we can easily copy and paste from other places, it's like we try sometimes to like force God's hand or force an experience on people, when we all we need to do is really just like open our hands up and say, you know what, God, we've rehearsed this song and we have an arrangement for this, and like let's just do it. Let's just plan to do it how it's planned or whatever, and see what He does with it. You know, and God's gonna use those things, and He's gonna pour the gasoline on certain places and certain people with different anointings and whatnot. But my biggest thing that I see with it all right now is that I see a lot of forcing it. I see a lot of people trying to push it to places that maybe it isn't in that moment, or their community isn't. And some of that comes from, I think, isolation and people, digesting certain things on their own. But as much as we can do to recognize those things, see those things, and then hopefully sprinkle it into our community, so that like, maybe we will get there, or we're going to do something like that. But I don't ever want it to be this like thing we're always striving after. I don't want to strive for charismatic moments. It's like those things are gonna happen as God allows them, not so much as my effort and might get them there. So
that's cool. That's awesome, man.
It's a hard question to answer with the direction of worship. I think definitely in Western culture, where as things are becoming more commercialized, the race for the temptation is there to make a lot of money with this certain
church labels.
Yeah, with church labels, exactly. And it's easy to fall into that place. And so, I think the enemy definitely uses that to corrupt the church and say like, oh, well, worship music is just a moneymaker. It's just a machine. There's nothing genuine in it. It's easy to believe that. I think as long as the push for incorporating the gospel into worship songs is being pushed, I think that's always going to have some kind of effect on the listener. Sometimes I mean, I don't know how the theology is going to get, correct this if I'm wrong, but I think sometimes even when a song is used for selfish gain or something, if the gospel is in there somehow, it's going to be able to work for good to some point.
The message of Christ will still be more received than the other stuff. I think sometimes when people have intentions for selfish gain, God can still use that to bring believers into the church. And I just know that anything that's outside of Christ is going to fall away at some point. And so ultimately, I think we'll see a lot of shedding of worship culture. Things will probably go away to some degree. I think we may see that in churches like Bethel or Hillsong. There's a dying away. I think right now we're in a place where we're waiting for new songs that really catch fire. That's why Maverick City is blowing up right now, because they're doing they're engaging in something new. And it's like a whole new direction that's different than what we've seen in the past, I think.
I think God's gonna use whatever you bring. But he also really cares about what you bring, and he cares about where it comes from and how you got there. And so I think especially today we need to always take a hard look at why do I want to do this song, or why do I want to play my guitar this way, or my drums this way, or the key, why am I doing these things? And through that I think we're gonna get closer to maybe what it means to really serve our teams in our church and our communities, rather than I'm just gonna do what I like and what I think is best, and bring it, and and then I'll think about what God might use it for, and I'll do it because I think, oh, it worked there, it worked here, and so I think that we need to have that sort of humble understanding of knowing that God's going to use what we have, but we also have to be pure in our intentions, in our preparation, because it can easily just turn into the me show, or doing what I want to do, or what I have
copying,
thought of.
Copying, so that's inauthentic, and people can feel that too. That's good, man. Well, thank you guys for coming on the show.
Dude, thank you, man.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for taking the time. We'll have to do this again and get more deeper into some of the discussion.
This is just episode 1.
Exactly. This is volume 1.
Worth of content.
We're going to have 16 volumes.
Nice, man.
I really appreciate you guys, man, for coming on. And let's do it again, man.
Thank you, bro. Bless you, man.
Bless you guys.